May you live in interesting times. That's the way the saying goes. And while that may be true and it can get you very excited about some of the rumors we've been hearing, there's one I think is really important and telling because it comes on the heels of the failure of the Acolyte, and it would spell kind of a form of doom towards the modern audience that Star Wars has been pursuing and has been unable to find, much like people who are interested in the merchandise that, was for that show, or basically any of the woke merchandise that was coming out of Disney. And you can see a video on that right up there if you so choose. But we need to fall on this story, and we need to move on it if we can and push it as far as we can. Because if this is true, well, it's a good thing. That's right. The rumor is that Star Wars, The High Republic, is coming to an end because, well, the Acolyte got canceled. And it really just goes to show that with the dwindling book sales from the moment they started their very first publication, this has no reason to exist and it really doesn't have any fans. Now, I would say that's a shame, but this stuff is just full of garbage propaganda, and that's not what Star Wars fans show up for. So the new rumor is claiming that Lucasfilm's publishing and media initiative, Star Wars The High Republic, is coming to an end. Now, mind you, this was originally announced to us years ago, all the way back, I think, in 2020, when they were pushing this idea of Project Luminous. Luminous sounded something quite exciting. It was definitely related to Star Wars, and we knew it. And they were talking about launching something that was just going to be widespread, broadly reaching, and something that would reinvigorate the Star Wars fan base. Well, all of those things turned out to be a lie. And when we saw the promotional materials, we found out that diversity and dinosaurs were the things that they were going to run with. And we also found out that they were going to not really include Luke Skywalker. They actually had his face on one of their whiteboards on the side, or actually, I guess, in a cubicle for one of the employees with a circle and a line through it, meaning no thank you. And look, that proved to be true, but ultimately they had to come back with it. And as we dive deeper into this story, maybe we'll find out why. But this new rumor comes directly from WDW Pro, who is definitely a part of that Park Place from which I got the story, written by John Trent. And as we go through this, I say this: I believe it. It has an incredible track record, so I don't know why you wouldn't believe it. And chance of something that he says coming true is in the high 90s, whereas other people, nowhere close. Now, Pro stated that according to our sources, the High Republic is coming to an end. The people that we're talking to are saying to us that it is looking like Disney is ready to pull the plug on the High Republic. And the Acolyte being canceled is just the beginning of that. But it is also a catalyst of it. Now, I don't find this hard to believe. This was one of the last pieces that were in place as far as the High Republic went, and this was kind of the do or die moment, I would imagine. He then stated, so basically for years, Disney has been building towards putting the High Republic on the small screen and then the big screen eventually. And so they had the rollout of the young adult novels, which did not go very well. Outside of the first book, everything else went downhill. And so they actually found their way onto the New York Times bestsellers list, but that really doesn't mean anything because basically you can pay your way to get onto the bestsellers list. And you can certainly disagree with that. In fact, Pro actually says that in the story here. It's subjective, but believe what you want. You can kind of find your way onto the bestsellers list if you have the right contacts and the right amount of money. Things did not go well for the High Republic, and he's referring now to some stories where we know that Barnes and Noble really couldn't sell these books, but they had an obligation to place them in a specific place, I believe end caps. And so they did, but they placed them on the floor and they put other better selling Star Wars material on the shelves, which also made a lot of sense. The Timothy Zahn books sold very, very well, of course, and their books not so much. So the High Republic is supposed to be in a given space contractually, but they went on the floor in that space. It's not an uncommon practice for things that aren't moving. If you trip over something, maybe you'll buy it. I don't know. So Disney had built this up, leading to the Acolyte. And what happened, of course, the viewership tanked. It ran absolutely into the ground almost immediately following the second episode. Well, if you remember correctly, it premiered the first two episodes on the same night, trying to artificially get a bump in viewership. And while that may have worked, it started to run downhill from there. So by the time we got to the fourth week or the fourth episode, they fell off the top 10 as far as the tracking data for Nielsen. And as I've pointed out in a previous video, right up there, Nielsen's the real deal when it comes to that. And the Let's Get High Republic, well, it wasn't. So now, with all of that having been built up to the small screen, this entire series of books that led absolutely nowhere, there's no reason to continue with this particular venture anymore. The High Republic is unpopular, and the show that came from it is equally, if not more, unpopular. So it's so utterly unsuccessful, and obviously it has no merchandising power. It is basically valueless, much like Disney Plus itself, but that's a conversation for another day. So here's the tricky part about it all, according to the source anyway. Um, you're not going to get an announcement about this. The High Republic is going to be ended by Disney very quietly. And they're going to do it very quietly because it can give Disney quite the black eye if they don't. And again, as he mentions, it's rumor territory. So take it with a grain of salt if you so choose. But it's going to be phased out over the next 2 years, which means you'll probably not see these books around for much longer. Well, you won't see any new books around very soon. And while you may see the books a lot longer, well, they won't go anywhere after that. Ultimately, according to Pro, this leads to them clearing the decks and getting rid of all of those items that were already paid for and budgeted and whatever's in production. And that's going to be it. That'll be it. They will wrap it all up from there, and then they're going to stop it. Makes a lot of sense. Stop making bad business decisions with your money. Um, and again, there's no reason to continue. There's no future, and there's really no reason to get a second season of Acolyte, despite 50 some thousand people that really want it. If that's all you can muster, I don't know if that's something that anybody would be paying attention to. But as has been suggested, if you have an extra $180 million that you're willing to give to Disney, well, maybe they'll give you your second season of a show. Now, this is also consistent with something that Pro said last August, that they were definitely getting ready to wind this down. In fact, um, Disney Lucasfilm Press was being given orders from Disney, not from Lucasfilm, but from Disney, that they needed to wind down the High Republic, and it's time to wind down the young adult novel series. I think that's largely because they weren't being purchased and or doing well. He also says, I don't know exactly what this means. I don't know if that means immediately that they will cease to get releases, that phase 3 is the final phase for this push that they've had. It is completely unsuccessful in about every way you can imagine. And again, he cites the actual numbers that were, coming out of that particular effort. And it's said here that the latest issue of the High Republic back then, that's a year ago, only moved about 60,000 units total, which is absolutely terrible. I can't even imagine how many millions of copies that the Timothy Zahn books have sold, but I'm sure it's substantial. Apparently, the authors, Michael Gallagher and Declan Finn, shared on their Upstream Reviews Substack that the publishing initiative for this dropped 90 to 95% between the launch of Light of the Jedi and the current High Republic books. That was barely over 2 years of actual production and distribution to outlets like Barnes and Noble, Amazon, et cetera, other bookstores as well. And since Disney's takeover of the property, only 4 books have broken 100,000 copies in sales, besides the aforementioned Light of the Jedi. And 3 of them were written by Zahn, which makes sense. The fifth and final was the first Chuck Wendig novel, whose sales wibbled and wobbled their way into a ditch with the following books, and nobody seems to be picking up the current ones or any of the more recent offerings. Ultimately, there's no reason to disregard this rumor as something that's actually happening. As I mentioned before, because of Pro's sources, he usually gets things right. And I'm believing it based on the sales numbers, because you cannot continue to produce things like this and make zero money and zero headway into trying to develop a new arm of Star Wars that really clearly nobody wants. This is another example of how, when you say you're producing something for a modern audience, uh, you're producing it for no one, because no one buys it and no one shows up. Anyway, those are my thoughts. What are yours? It's audience participation time. So let me know those thoughts down in the comments section below. Do you believe that this is going to happen slowly over time? Do you think we'll see it more rapidly? Do you think that the petitioners will actually get a second season of The Acolyte? Or do you think that, well, it's likely dead already? And perhaps I'm right about the Mando and Grogu film, and that it will not be a solution to Disney's Star Wars problem. In fact, it might expose the fact that they have, well, devalued the brand. As I said, let me know in the comments section below. Double check while you're down there that you're still subscribed. And if you are among the 69+% of people that are not currently subscribed, that check out my material regularly, well, hit the red button. It's free. Make it gray. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on all the notifications, that little bell thingy. Make sure you turn it to all so you don't miss any of the videos. You don't miss any of the daily live streams, and you don't miss any of the special content that I release from time to time, because it's the only way you're going to find it. And I'll do my level best to make sure, if you have the bell turned on, that I'll put posts in the community tab. That way you won't miss things quite as often, because YouTube is a little stingy with those notifications. Also, quick reminder, I actually crossed the magical 25K, and I would like to stay there with 25,000 subscribers. So double check that subscribe button once more. Make sure it's gray. Make sure you're subscribed. And check out the wonderful live stream that I'm doing, the celebration live stream that I'm doing, where I'll be dressed up as Hobo Gandalf. So if you want to see that, you want to see me act quite the fool for at least a couple of hours with some interesting friends, well, I encourage you to be there on Saturday. Let's just say it that way. On that note, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya.